Hello, and welcome to this grammar session on comparative structures. This can be found in Q Skills 5, Listening and Speaking, starting on page 48 in Unit 2. So first, let us have a look what a comparative structure is. Comparative structures are extensions of normal comparatives, but they're using intensifier words like these: more, than, less, much, and also some phrases: as much as little as, more than, and less than. We use comparative structures when we are discussing similar things, differences between at least two different things. Now, they work like comparatives because they broadly follow the same rules. There is one small difference, and that comparative structures can be applied to nouns and verbs as well as adjectives and adverbs. So first, let's have a look at the rules for comparatives when we're using adjectives. As you will probably remember, we have things like clear and tall, one-syllable words. We add er, clearer, taller. For adjectives that end in y, such as easy or busy, then we add ier, so they become easier or busier. For adjectives of three or more syllables, we put in front of them more or less. For example, more beautiful, less beautiful, even more beautiful, even less beautiful. When we are comparing two things that are very similar, like comparison of equality, then we use as clear as or as beautiful as, like that. The same rules apply when we are using adverbs. More slowly than, less slowly than if it's a negative comparison. If it's an intensified comparison, it is much more slowly than or much faster than. In a comparison of equality, we use as fast as or as slowly as. The same rules apply to nouns. So we have things like more time than, and if it's a negative comparison, less time than. We can intensify it by saying things like much less time than or much more time than. If it's a comparison of equality, as much time as. Verbs, however, are different because the verb always comes before the comparison. He travels more than me. Negative comparison, he travels less than you. Same is true for intensified comparisons using a verb. He travels much more than him. When you get a comparison of equality, he travels as much as they do. Same principle each time. The verb comes before the comparison. When we compare things, we have to compare like with like. You can't compare two completely different things. Let's have a look at the example. The trip to China had more stops than the trip to India. The trip to China and the trip to India are both noun phrases and very similar ones. So you can compare the two of them together. This next one, however, is not a comparison. The trip to China had more stops than India. Here you're trying to compare a noun phrase with a noun, which in this case is the name of a country. The second sentence means that India is moving around and stopping and then moving off somewhere else, and this, of course, is quite impossible. Make sure you compare like with like, otherwise you could end up with a very bad metaphor. In comparison structures, we try to avoid repetition of main elements. For example, The Cambridge Science demonstrations covered more fields than the Stanford Science demonstrations. This is not a very good use of English. What we would do is use a synonym for when we're talking about Stanford. We'll get this. The Cambridge Science demonstrations covered more fields than the Stanford exhibits. We also tried to avoid repetition of elements in other ways, and we can use pronouns to do this, of which there are many, and there's quite a list here for you to read. Here's an example. The meals we ate in Lebanon were better than those in England. It saves having to repeat the words, the meals we ate. Instead, we use one word and we have a comparison. The use of comparatives, however, is not free of problems entirely. And when you're using I and me, this is one of those areas of language where there are differences. Frustratingly, and also a little bit annoyingly, for everyone involved, both of these are correct. But it depends where you come from for them to be correct. Jane is taller than me. This is what you find in UK English, Australia, New Zealand. Jane is taller than I. It's very common in the USA and also some parts of Canada. In British English, we would insist on the use of the verb to be after I, whereas US English would not. Jane is taller than I am. That would be the British way of putting it. Now, there's been 2 centuries of academic debate just about this issue, and it hasn't solved it. And I very much doubt it's going to get solved anytime soon. So, here are some practice exercises for you to have a go at. There's 4 possible answers to each one, and you will need to stop the video so you have time to consider them. The answers will follow. And here are the answers to the exercises that you've just done. As you'll see for number 6, all of the answers are correct. Now it is your turn. You can do more practice by going to the exercises in the Q Skills book on page 48. That concludes this session on comparative structures. Thank you.